I think we got to 27a, the Mishnah. So 27a1. Okay. So the Mishnah states the following. Okay, we're going to be talking about how many meals we need to eat on the holiday of Sukkot. How many of them have to be eaten in the Sukkah? So let's see. Because we know general the rule is if you're eating a meal, the meal has to be eaten in the Sukkah, right? You can't have a bread meal outside the Sukkah. But the question is, how many meals am I obligated to have in, how many meals do I have to make sure to eat? Here comes the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Eliezer says, 14 meals, chayav adam lechol b'sukkah. Anna, would you mind fixing the screen again? Gets all these, Arba Esrei, 14 meals the person is obligated to, thank you very much, to eat in the sukkah. Achat b'yom v'achat b'layla. He says, Mr. Patesh, 14 meals. That means, as we know on Shabbat, we know we have 3 meals on Shabbat. And everyone knows, like it says in Shulchan Aruch, that on Yom Tov, you have a meal the night and you have a meal by day, right? You have, like it says in Shulchan Aruch, that a person has to have a have a meal on Yom Tov on bread. I mean, that's the halacha in practice. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's a minimum of 14, but it's not the halacha, because that means every day of Chol Hamoed you would have to have 2 meals, right? And we don't require that we have to have a meal. We don't say that you have to eat a meal in the sukkah. That means you have to have bread on every day of the holiday, right? It's a 7-day holiday. Yeah, outside of Israel, we sit in the sukkah on the 8th day also, but it's a 7th-day holiday. Let's say in the land of Israel. So he says every day you have to have 2 meals in the sukkah, one in the day and one at night. The commentators ask, what about the Suda Shlishit? Don't you need to have extra meal on Shabbat? So some say that, let's say you could have that Suda Shlishit, 1 meal you have in the morning, and the 1 meal, instead of having at night after dark, you'll have it before dark. So that could be, that's why it's only 14. But you're still going to have 3 meals on Shabbat, but you can have 1 Friday night, 1 Shabbat morning, and 1 Shabbat before evening. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Arba Esrei Su'ud Chayv Adam Lechol b'sukkah. And the Gemara is going to explain what's his reasoning. 14 meals, and that's why Rashi, the first Rashi jumps and he says, the Gemara is going to explain his reasoning, because it sounds very novel that you have to have 14 meals on the holiday of Sukkot. Achas b'yom v'achat b'layla. The Chachamim said, Ein ledava kitzva. There is no set requirement to have a meal on the holiday except chutz milele yom tov rishon shachag b'vad, except the first night of the holiday of Sukkot. So the first night of the holiday of Sukkot, that is the obligation to have a meal in the Sukkah. Now, but the morning, now what does it imply? That the morning, the first day of Sukkot, the morning of Sukkot, he doesn't obligate you to have the meal in the Sukkah. Now, we all know we eat on Yom Tov a meal. And like the Shulchan Aruch says, you're supposed to have bread, you're supposed to have 2 chalot on Yom Tov at your meal. The same way on Shabbat, you have a meal with 2 chalot. You're supposed to go ahead and have 2 breads on Yom Tov at your meal, both by night and both by day. So how does this feel? How does this sync with the halacha of the Chachamim? Again, the Chachamim say the only time you have to have a meal in the Sukkah is the night the first night of Sukkot. So, so let's say this year Sukkot started on Friday night. So according to that, the only time you have to have in the Sukkot is Friday. Now, the obvious question is, what do you mean? What about the halacha that says you have to go ahead and have a meal, you have to have bread in the morning of Yom Tov as well, right? So some will explain the obligation of having bread on Yom Tov, having a meal, bread of Yom Tov, you can fulfill that obligation by having a kazayit of bread, right? An olive size of bread. That's the size of bread that you need to have in order to say Birkat HaMazon, the size of an olive. But we say the size of an olive is not the amount of bread that's obligated in a sukkah. It's still considered a more of a temporary type of a meal. So to obligate you to be in the sukkah, you have to make sure you eat in the sukkah is only the first night of Sukkot. But the other time, it's possible that a person would be eating outside the sukkah, even though he's going to be having something that's called technically a meal. Let's say the morning of the holiday, he'll be having a meal, he's having bread, but technically, he doesn't have an obligation to eat an amount of bread that would require him to be in the sukkah. That is how some explain. Others explain that maybe you don't have an obligation at all to have a bread meal during the daytime of Sukkot. Rather, you have to have some other foods of honor of the holiday. But in practice, we follow the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says you have to have bread at night and bread by day in the holiday of because he says you have to have two breads. Okay. Now, as the Chafetz Chaim says, in the two meals you have to go ahead and have, each the night you have a bread meal and the day you have a bread meal. There's a question in halacha, if a person forgot Ya'aleh v'Yavo on the holiday of Sukkot, let's say by daytime, let's say the holiday would take place, let's say this year, right? The holiday took place Friday night was the first night. And now Shabbat morning, he said the Birkat HaMazon, he said the Shabbat insert, would say V'achlitzenu, but he forgot the Ya'aleh v'Yavo insert, which is given for the holiday of Sukkot. Would he have to repeat the Birkat HaMazon for not mentioning the holiday of Sukkot? So at nighttime, first night of Sukkot, if he forgot it, he will, he was in the Sukkah and he forgot it, he would have to repeat the Birkat HaMazon. We do a Yom Tov Kiddush, but an insert of Shabbat. Shabbat morning, Shabbat afternoon, we do the Yom Tov, also the Yom Tov prayer with the inserts of Shabbat. And Sunday is the repeat of the first day. It's because we have outside of Israel, we have 2 days of the holiday. Right. So Sunday night is Chalamoid, right? We had the holiday was Friday night was the first night, Saturday night was the second night, and Sunday night was Chalamoid. We made Havdalah Sunday night, but it was still the holiday, but it's called the intermediate days, the Chalamoid, like a quasi Yom Tov, right? But it's all part of the fourth right. So he's saying Chalamoid, you would have to have exactly. He would say Sunday night you have to have a meal in the Sukkah, or he would say you had your meal Sunday, or let's say Monday morning you would have to have a meal in the Sukkah. Monday night a meal in the Sukkah. Tuesday morning a meal in the Sukkah. During those intermediate days, he would require 2 meals each day. That was Rabbi Eliezer. So if you hold that you have to have bread at each meal of Yom Tov, or let's say, well, at least the night meal and the morning meal. So if you forgot, since you're required to have bread, therefore the Shulchan Aruch says you would, since it's a requirement to have bread, if you forgot the Yalav Yavo, you would have to repeat the Birkat Hamazon. There are others that say that, like the way the Chachamim of the Mishnah states, that the only obligation to have bread, or some will read it, that the only obligation to have bread is only the first night of Sukkot and the first night of Pesach, but you have to have matzah. So only those two times, if you forgot the Yalav Yavo, would you repeat, because you had an obligation to bring yourself into the meal. But other times during the holiday, if you forgot the Yalav Yavo in the Birkat Hamazon, maybe you will not have to repeat. So that's a matter of discussion in halacha. So let's go back again to the Mishnah. We'll take the Mishnah from the top. Bileza Omer, Arbe Esrei Sudot Chayev Adam Lechol B'Sukkah. There are 14 meals that a person is obligated to have in the Sukkah. Achat B'Yom, by the way, Anna, if you want to mention to the group that we're on, thank you very much. Achat B'Yom v'Achat B'Layla, one by day and one by night. There's no set obligation of having a meal on the holiday of Sukkot, only only the night of Sukkot, the first night of Sukkot, that's where you have an obligation to have a meal in the Sukkah. And again, in practice, we all know, we go to the Sukkah, we make sure to go to the Sukkah both by night and by day of Sukkot, of the holiday, right? We make sure we have a meal. Let's say if tonight would be the holiday, you would be in the Sukkah tonight and tomorrow morning and the Suda Shlishit. We would go ahead and find ourselves in the Sukkah. V'odom Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says a very interesting idea. Mi shelo achal leile Yom Tov Rishon. A guy did not eat on the night of Sukkot. He didn't eat the night of Sukkot, the first night of Sukkot. He was supposed to have his meal in the Sukkah, and he missed it. Didn't have a meal in the Sukkah. Yashlim leilei Yom Tov Achon Shachak. You make up. There's a makeup. Just like there's a halacha, if a person missed shachrit, person missed davening in the morning, he slept late. He didn't intend to sleep late. He wanted to get up to pray. He slept late. So there's a makeup that you make up the shachrit at mincha. You daven the regular mincha, and then right after you take 3 steps back and you finish your first mincha, you wait a few seconds. You go back after you finish the shachrit. So after you finish mincha, you finish the amidah. Then you go forward to say a second amidah, a makeup. You made up. It's a second Shemona Esrei. It's a second amidah. The second one is a makeup for the first shachrit that you missed. Only is the amidah. Yes, the person should put tefillin on. I mean, I would think he would put it on even before he davens the mincha. He would put on the tefillin if he got for all the mincha plus the makeup. Right, because if he got up before 12 or today before 1, because today Chatzot midday is later today, soon it's going to be 12 o'clock. You could technically pray up to 1 o'clock. But if not, if you pass 1 o'clock, you missed the morning. Since you passed 1 o'clock, he passed Chatzot. So then he had something called a makeup. You see, the Shulchan Aruch, it says in Simek Kuf Ches. Yes, you miss mincha, you play arvid. You miss arvid, you play shachrit. You do a second amidah as the makeup. It says the Shulchan Aruch and Simek Kuf Ches. If a person made a mistake, it's not talking about a person intentionally missed. If you intentionally miss, you cannot make it up. And if a person knows that it's time to pray, but he's lazy. He knows he should pray. It's not that but he intentionally didn't pray. And then afterwards he says, come on, what did I do? I should have done that. But since he intentionally didn't pray, He knew he was supposed to pray and he knew he was capable of praying, but he didn't pray, then he loses that. He doesn't have the opportunity to make it up. The makeup is only when you didn't intend to miss it. Something came up or whatever it was. So then if you didn't pray Shachrit, Mincha, you do two Amidah by Mincha. The first one is for Mincha. The first one is the Mincha prayer, which is the time. Let's say a guy missed, he got out of bed at 1 o'clock. So 1:30, let's say today, he would go ahead and he'd pray Mincha. And then the first prayer is for Mincha. And the second one is for the makeup. It's for the makeup. He's making up the Shachrit. Like about a half hour, around about a half hour after midday, like around today must be around 1:20 or so. Usually if you pray like around 1:30, generally you'd be safe. But today it's earlier. That's the. But you only can make up if you're if you missed. I mean, if a guy missed Shachrit, and then he Mincha time passes, and it's nighttime, he can't make up the Shachrit at night. You only can make up the what you missed at the next possible time period of prayer. If you miss Shachrit, you can make it up at Mincha. If you miss Mincha, you can make it up at Arvit. You can't make up something that you missed at one time. At Arvit, you can't make up for Shachrit. For Shachrit, you can make up Arvit. That was the last prayer. As long you can make up anything, as long as you missed. It's one prayer ago. You can't make up something that was supposed to be done. That was done. What? Right. Meaning to say, this morning I can make up for my night. Okay. Now. Okay, so that's a little bit about the concept of makeup. So Rabbi Eliezer holds that there's this idea of making up the meal that I missed. I was supposed to honor the holiday of Sukkot with a meal. I was supposed to eat in the Sukkah the first night in the Sukkah, and I did not eat the first night in the Sukkah, so I have to make it up. And I can make it up technically anytime during the holiday, and I can even make it up on the night of Shmini Atzeret. The night of Shmini Atzeret, the next holiday, right? Shmini Atzeret is the 8th day of the holiday, and some understand that I can even go ahead and go into the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret, which generally, I mean, today we're outside the land of Israel, we eat in the Sukkah Shmini Atzeret, but the idea is I can even make it up on the 8th day of the holiday. I can make it up. Let's see, what's the language? Yashlim. I make it up. Leila Yom Tov Achman Achad. I could even make it up on the last night of the holidays. I saw one of the commentaries say, let's see what they say over here. He says the following. I mean, some ask the question, why do they say you can make it up at the night of Shmini Atzeret? You can really even make it up during the daytime of Shmini Atzeret also. But this is the makeup. We want to make up the Sudah, and you have the whole holiday to make it up. And you even not only have this holiday of Sukkot to make it up, you have it even Shmini Atzeret. You could also use towards making it up, and you go to the sukkah, and you will have this extra meal. The Gemara will explain a little more detail. I'll have this extra meal in honor of the night meal, the first night meal of Sukkot that I missed. I got to make it up. Yes. Right. That's considered you had a meal. Yes. I mean, that's generally people. Many would say that's because you had a kazayit. But remember, Mr. Batesh, if you had a kazayit in the sukkah of bread, if you're leaving the sukkah and you want to have bread outside the sukkah, you can't. Again, maybe there's a small amount of bread could be done outside the sukkah, but in general, you can't eat. We'll stay away from having bread outside the sukkah. But if you had a kazayit in the sukkah, that is the meal that you had the obligation in the sukkah. Correct. So now the Chachamim say, "Ein ledover tashlumin." The Chachamim says that there is no makeup for missing the first meal of Sukkot. Hear that, Morris? If a guy missed going to the Sukkah the first night of Sukkot, you know what it's like? A guy went ahead. We have a mitzvah to eat matzah the first night of Pesach. What happens if a person does not eat matzah the first night of Pesach? He sleeps the whole night. He sleeps the whole night of Pesach, and he missed eating matzah. Is there a makeup for the mitzvah? There's no makeup. You have a mitzvah the first night of Pesach, eat matzah. You don't eat matzah the first night of Pesach, there's no makeup. The Chacham say the same thing when it comes to Sukkah. There's a special mitzvah the first night of Sukkot to go ahead and have bread morning max and have the bread in the Sukkah. To have the challah in the Sukkah the first night of Sukkot. If you missed having the challah in the Sukkah the first night of Sukkot, there's no makeup. You lost. In life, there are certain things that cannot be made up. Now, we're going to say there is something called tshuva. There's something called that I could do repentance for what I did wrong. A guy missed out on a mitzvah and he can't make up the mitzvah, but he could repent. He can ask forgiveness. But that's not that he made up the mitzvah. It's not that he has a way to do that mitzvah again. And I'll give you an example. Every morning, there's a mitzvah to say Kriya Shema. And the Shema has a certain time. You're supposed to say the Shema. Let's say today, there are two different times, different opinions about what's the latest time to fulfill your morning mitzvah of Shema. Some say it's around 9:20. Some say it's around 9:56. There's different opinions how late it goes. It's going to get much earlier when they turn the clock. A guy wakes up at 11 o'clock in the morning. He lost that mitzvah of Shema. Technically, he lost the mitzvah. He'll still say the Shema, he'll still pray, but he missed that mitzvah, that morning mitzvah of Shema. It has a certain time. You can't make up that mitzvah. It's lost. So that's what the Chachamim say. The Chachamim say that this is also one of those things in life, Aaron, that if a person misses, he can't make it up. If he missed coming to the Sukkah the first night of Sukkot, we're on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, 27a. He cannot make it up. Ein ledavar tashlumin. There's no makeup for this. There are certain things that cannot be fixed. This is a pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech talks about, that there are certain circumstances, that if you missed out, like the Gemara in Brachot, I think says, if let's say they were asking people to participate in a mitzvah, to work together, and you lost it. That means what? Now you want to make up. They already did the project. You weren't involved. So that's This is one of those things. And mu'uvot, something that's crooked, lo yichol liskon. You can't fix this. It's too late. Sometimes there's, there are things, just like I presume by stocks. A person buys a stock. If you don't buy a stock by a certain time, sometimes it's too late when you want to buy the stock. You missed it. You missed it at the time, but now it's too late. So that's the same thing over here. That if your person goes ahead and he missed the night meal, the first night of Sukkot, he's not eating the Sukkah. He can't say, you know what, Rabbi, I'm going to have 2 meals. I'll have 2 meals on the first day of Sukkot. I'll make sure to have 2 meals the first day. I'll make up for the, I'll make up for the night meal. No, you can't do that. Even though, when it comes to prayer, if you miss a morning prayer, you make it up by mincha. You said before, you daven, the second Amidah is the makeup Amidah. If a guy fell asleep last night, he didn't daven Arvit. And he didn't mean to miss Arvit. Comes this morning, he davens the regular davening, regular shachrit, and then after he takes his 3 steps back, good morning, Mr. Batesh, takes 3 steps back, finishes his shachrit, then he will go ahead and maybe wait a few seconds, and then go forward to pray a second Amidah. That's called tashlumin. That's making up. There are things in life that you can make up. A person doesn't treat his wife the way they should. Hopefully they can make up. They could, you make up, you made a mistake. Sometimes maybe there are people that they can't make up, and that's bad news. So that's bad news. But thank God, usually there's people should be able to make up. The point is, don't make the mistake in the beginning to have to make up. Don't miss the prayer that you have to make it up, right, Mr. Batesh? But there is makeup by prayer if you missed it. It's interesting. I wonder if we can make an analogy. There's no makeup by prayer if you intentionally miss the prayer. There might not be makeup in marriage when you intentionally act in a certain way. It's much harder. Of course, hopefully everybody should be forgiving, even people intentionally don't act properly. It's much harder to make up when you intentionally intended to do something wrong. Okay, something to think about. So that what do you say, Mr. Badesh? Okay, so the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara opens up with, he's the first opinion in the Mishnah that says, we have an opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that he once held, he changed his mind eventually, but he once held that on Sukkot, you have to have every day 2 meals. 2 meals a day, because that's the normal eating of a person. The old days, they ate 2 meals, not 3 meals a day. We are in our society, we eat 3 meals a day. Good morning, right? We eat 3 meals a day, but that's not, 3 meals a day was not the norm for thousands of years. It wasn't the norm going back to the time of the, I don't know, we have to wonder, when did the 3rd meal a day begin? It was a 2 meal day. I presume what happened was a person would get up in the morning, you would pray. After you pray, you eat, you go to work, and then you come home and you have another meal, right? You had your day of work and you have another meal. Not this lunch break type of morning, have a great day. Not this lunch break type of in the middle of the day. Maybe you have a snack, but not a meal. Not what we call a formal meal of bread. So he held, you have to go ahead and have the same way in your house. The normal thing was a person would have 2 meals a day, 2 bread meals a day. So a sukkah is supposed to be like your house. So therefore, you should live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. So the same way in your house, you have 2 meals a day generally. So too, in a sukkah, you have to go ahead and have bread twice in the day, and once in the day, and one at night. That was his initial reasoning for his understanding of the law. However, the Rabbanan say, listen, the fact that we eat generally 2 meals a day, we don't have to eat 2 meals a day. There's no obligation obligating anybody to have 2 meals a day. right, Mr. Feldman? No one obligates them to have 2 meals a day. You want to go ahead and not have a meal during the day. You want to snack during the day, not have bread. So nobody's going to, there's no obligation. You're not mandated to have a meal. Therefore, the Chacham say you do not need to find yourself in a sukkah twice a day having bread in the sukkah. You want to go ahead and not eat bread, not have pasta, not have mizono. The Chacham say you don't have to find yourself in a sukkah. You don't have to be eating in the sukkah. You're not obligated to go ahead and buy bread to eat in the sukkah during the days of Sukkot. Except the only time that you're going to have to find yourself in the sukkah, the Chacham are going to say about the first night of Sukkot. And as we spoke, we also, by the day meals of the Yom Tov as well. The night meals of Yom Tov and the day meals. So look what the Gemara says. My time of the Rebbe Eliezer. Teishu, good morning, Daniel. Teishu ke'ein teduru. It says, and 7 days of Sukkot, you're supposed to be a Sukkot, Teishu shivat yamim. You're supposed to dwell in the Sukkah for 7 days. How do you dwell in the Sukkah? The way you dwell in your house. Ma dira achat biyom v'achat b'layla. Just like in your house, you have 1 meal by day and 1 meal by night. So the Sukkah, so Sukkah also, Rabbi Eliezer says you have to have 1 meal by day, achat biyom v'achat b'layla. Rabbanan, and why do Rabbanan disagree? So Rabbanan hold like I told you, kedira. You know what? It's like your house. Just like ma dira. You want to be on a diet? You want to be on a diet? You can be on a diet. No one's asking you. It says every day you have to eat in your house bread, right? Are you obligated to eat today bread in your house? No. So therefore, if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat bread. Comes the holiday of Chalamoed, intermediate days. You don't want to eat bread, don't eat bread. What do we have? We have 5 intermediate days. Okay, the 5th day is Hoshana Rabbah. Those 5 days, you're not obligated to eat bread. No one obligates you to eat. Now, there is a concept, of course, to honor Chalamoed, to honor the mitzvah. It's very nice to have bread. It's, simcha, you have a nice happy. Have a nice festive meal even during the intermediate days, but it's not the level of obligation. You could honor the Chalamoid with nice wine. Chalamoid. You can honor Chalamoid with nice clothing. Simcha. There's ways of you're supposed to honor the holiday, even the intermediate days with simcha. You have different ways of simcha. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, why is it that the first night of Sukkot, the Chachamim say you must find yourself in a Sukkah the first night of Sukkot? So the Gemara said, meaning why is the first night of Sukkot different than the other days of Sukkot? The other days of Sukkot, you say you don't have to find yourself eating a meal. Why do I have to find myself eating a meal the first night of Sukkot? So he says, Nemakan chamishasa chamishasa. This is a very famous Gezerah Shaveh. Gezerah Shaveh is when the Torah uses the same word in 2 different areas, 2 different places. And by using the same word, if sometimes the reason why I use the same word is to teach us to apply the law that applies by A, applies by B. And in order for us to know whether that law that the law that applies by A applies by B, this is something that Hashem, when he told Moshe, when Moshe was in the mountain for 40 days, 40 nights, he told him the oral law, and this is part of the oral law of how to expound on the psukim. That when the Torah says this word over here, this word is coming to teach us by having this parallel, by having the similar words in both places. Is it coming? But God has a lot of words to use. The fact that he used the same word in both places, is it coming to teach us a certain lesson or not? So here, there's a certain lesson. What's the lesson? It says the 15th day when it comes to holiday of Sukkot. It says the 15th day when a holiday of Matzah by Pesach. Pesach, the first night of Pesach, you have to have bread. What kind of bread? Matzah bread the first night. But you have to eat matzah. You have to have a meal, call it a bread meal, on the first night of Pesach. And it compares the first night of Pesach to the first night of what? Sukkot. So since you have to have a bread meal on the first night of Pesach, you're also required to have a bread meal in a Sukkah the first night of what? Of Sukkot. And we'll continue tomorrow more on this beautiful idea. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all for joining.